Okay, good morning and welcome everyone to the Fields COVID-19 seminar. I'm going to hand you over to Professor Jan Hong Wu, who will welcome our speaker.
So good morning, everybody. So on behalf of Kuma and behalf of the Fields Institute and our National Task Force, I'm very pleased to uh, welcome and present JC Professor Loredo-Osti from Memorial University. Um, as I told JC, this is my favorite university. Um, JC is the chair and professor of the department. JC has been very productive in a number of fields relevant to the COVID-19 research, statistical inference, the genetic epidemiology, among many other fields. And JC has been collaborating with his colleagues and in the Atlantic region, and is building a very nice and interdisciplinary group there, make contribution to the COVID-19 management in the Atlantic region. So JC, I'm very glad to have you, and it's your time.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. I would like to acknowledge that this presentation was going to be given by Amy Hurford, who is when the coronavirus started in Memorial University, or started in Canada. We were contacted by the government, and at that time I was the chair. We were contacted by the government to see if we can provide some advice. I was the chair of the department, and I get together some of the people who do dynamical systems and statistics and stochastics and so on. And we decided that Amy Hurford was going to be the leader of our group. And that's the way that we start working. And in the end, the group kind of shrunk a lot, but Amy and I keep working together. And it has been very fruitful. I think I really love to work with Amy, and I hope she recovers quickly. Okay, so and the presentation, the title is COVID management in Atlantic Canada. My youngest daughter asked me, I told her I was going to give a presentation today. She's upstairs. And then she says, what is the name of the presentation? I say, COVID management in Atlantic Canada. And say, you will do well. It's very easy to say, just keep the virus away and we are okay. And that is very much the management that my daughter wanted me to say that is the good management for Newfoundland. Okay. Atlantic Canada and the territories have experienced something that is different than the epidemic in other Canada provinces. We have very, very low rates of infection. We have very few cases. Newfoundland has less than one in the recent days. It's only 9 cases, which is extremely, extremely low. And the most that we have at some point was 190, 200, something like that. So we have had very, very few cases. And the same story is across the Canadian provinces. Then when we compare that experience with the pandemic and the experience that other jurisdictions like Ontario or Quebec or anywhere in the States, so Manitoba or some of there are those differences may suggest that there are different approaches to public health. Oh, as my daughter may say, with sheer luck that we have had in the Atlantic. But so one of the things that what I want to say is that the approach in Atlantic Canada responds to the conditions in Atlantic Canada. We are a small community if we compare ourselves with Ontario, with Quebec. So, and the dynamics of any expert in dynamical systems, any expert in infectious diseases will tell you that the outbreaks in a small community are quite different than those outbreaks in the big urban centers. When the prevalence is low, imported infections are not only a large portion of the active infections in the community, but also because of the proportional size with respect to the size of the population, they are the trigger of major outbreaks. So, and because of that, we start to wonder, do travel restrictions work? If they work, how we will place them in the context of the alert system that Canada and the federal government and the provinces implemented. So in Newfoundland, we have these 5 alert levels. When the public emergency was declared, we got into alert 5. Right now, we are living in alert 2 level. Okay, so as I said, many jurisdictions have implemented travel restrictions to reduce the spread. However, travel restrictions are not free of controversy. The WHO says that travel restrictions are no good, that they don't contain the spread. There is people who say that travel restrictions cause more damage than the one that they pretend to solve. There are some literature considering the impact of international travel restrictions on the COVID dynamics. However, there are very few where they study the travel restrictions within the country and domestic travel restrictions. And domestic travel restrictions are not free of controversy. Maybe you'll be aware that the province of Newfoundland and Labrador was subject to some lawsuit because of the travel restrictions that imposed into. So on May 4 of this year, Newfoundland implemented the travel restrictions, and the travel restriction system. No residents were required to have exemptions to enter in the province. So only residents, only people who could show they were residents of the province were allowed to come in, and people who was not resident, they need to have an exception. They need to be field responders. They need to be essential workers. They need to be. They need to have a reason to be here. And the evaluation of what is impact that had is something that we tried to do in a paper that Amy led the study to try to determine how good was the measure of what the Newfoundland people call the travel ban. So, and then once that we do the study, then we turn to the question, if we were able to implement travel bans or whatever else, not only travel ban, but an optimal control strategy, how an optimal strategy will look like, how will fare in the context of managing the disease, or managing the dynamics of the disease. So, and then it comes to when we don't have too many cases, then we need to do everything that we will do very much is just modeling and modeling the process. So models are appropriate for large populations. Models that are good for large populations may not perform well in small ones. And in Ontario and large jurisdictions and large urban centers and large or in the country as a whole, you may use ODEs and that will be okay because the population is large enough, the number of cases is large enough, and you are in a regime where that approach works. However, in a small population, stochastic fluctuations have much more chance of having an impact in the trajectories of an outbreak, have much more chance of being the driving force in the spread of the disease. So imports of infections may have a disproportionate effect when the number of cases is very small. Ergo, in the beginning of the outbreak, in the beginning of the pandemic. So to appropriately characterize the impact of the travel restrictions in Newfoundland, the impact of the restrictions on controlling the COVID-19, we use an stochastic model for studying the infection. Okay, the model that we use was used to forecast a range of possible outcomes that could have occurred in Newfoundland. And we run this study for 9 weeks after May 4. May 4 is the day that the travel ban was implemented. And why 9 weeks? Because 9 weeks is more or less the time horizon that the people who study the travel restrictions use in the literature. So it's nothing magic about that. It's just that's the most common time frame to study these things in the literature. So our model is at the beginning we tried some few different models. We try and suddenly it became obvious that New Zealand was having success in the handling of on the modeling of their pandemic or the epidemic at that time. So, and then we start to read the literature from them, and then what we did is we adapt. We take inspiration in that. It's very much their model with a little bit tweaks to make it fit, to make it proper for Newfoundland and Labrador. And that is we can say that it's a SIR approach with I divided in 3. It's divided in more, but and the background or the thing is a branching process. The way that the New Zealand did it, they start with a branching process. So and that's very much the way that we took. So what we have is the model. We have here is we have susceptibles, and the susceptibles get infected. So and a portion of a P portion of them will become asymptomatic or subclinical, I will say, and the 1 minus P will become clinical. The people who will manifest the disease will go through a preclinical stage where they don't have symptoms, although they are infected. Then they go clinical, and eventually they recover or they die. I should just remove, and we only have at that time 3 people who died here. Okay, so then this the other component is the importations, the people who came infected, who got the disease outside of the island, and they failed to quarantine, or they failed to follow the proper measures, and then they become contagious and touch with the local population. So those are the people, and that number of individuals have a rate of lambda v, and again, some of them will be asymptomatic, and some of them will develop symptoms. Okay, all these parameters are crucial in understanding how the model works. Okay, as I said, P is the proportion of asymptomatic individuals, and 1 minus P is the one of those who will progress through the preclinical and clinical stages. So the infectivity of an individual changes according to the serial interval distribution, and we assume that the serial, this distribution is a Weibull distribution with shape 2.83 and scale 5.6. in the beginning, and at the beginning of when we start this, we did not use the Weibull distribution. We used the empirical distribution that was published as from an empirical distribution from the Hubei province in China. And eventually, I decided to. I noticed that in New Zealand, when New Zealand they have this distribution, they were using this distribution, and when I overlap under the empirical distribution that they were using, it was practically not distinguishable. So then we just decided it was much easier to use to plug the Weibull distribution. With this parameterization, the peak of infectivity occurs more or less at the 5 days after the initial day of infection. 90% of the infections occur between the day 2 and the day 9, the day 8.4 after infection. And after the 21 days, the infectivity is 1 times 10 to the minus 15. So we say after 21 days, no one is infected. So the other interesting thing is about 99%, about 98% of the cases occur, or the effectivity occurs within the first 12 days of infection. So that is the time where the infectivity depending upon the day that the individual was infected. So it's very effective at the day 5, at the day 2, at the day 12 is almost not effective. And then by the day 21, we say the guy cannot be infective anymore, although he still may have some symptoms of the disease. The infectivity is also modulated or regulated by the compartment membership. So if the individual is preclinical, we assume that the is fully infected. It's 100% effective. If it was subclinical or symptomatic, for this study we used 75% because that was what we were by the time that we do the study, in the first days of June, we thought that was the infectivity of a subclinical individual, an asymptomatic individual. The new evidence says that subclinical individuals are as infective as preclinical individuals, okay, or very close to one. And the clinical individuals, clinical individuals are the ones that manifest symptoms, and once that they manifest symptoms, they become good citizens and they isolate themselves. So then the chance of infecting people is reduced drastically, because the ones that they isolate, the only people that they can infect are caregivers and household members. So I'm sorry. Now, preclinical individuals progress to clinical stage at the time 1, and self-isolate at the time 1 plus time 2. And this this variable time 1 plus time 2 is a random variable that follows a gamma distribution with parameters 6.1 and 7.1. The rate of infection of the ith individual, or the jth individual, infected at the time 10j, and the interval, and this interval t plus delta is lambda j t delta t, and lambda j or lambda jt is an expression that and this is the key to understand the effectivity. It's R0, that depends on the population, and then this is the CT, which is the cumulative number of cases over the size of the population. QT, which are the measures that the government or the public health policies implement, like lockdowns or whatever. FJ as is an indicator or is a coefficient that modulates what is the compartment or what is the stage or the I compartment, the infections compartment where the individual is at this time, and then the part where the serial time distribution intervenes. So DJ is an indicator of where the individual was infected, because only that portion because the infectivity will depend on the day that he was infected. And FJ, the F, capital FJ, T is the compartment where the individual actively infected is at the time T. And the function that counts for public health measures is QT, and I said QT is 1 for T less than T1, is Q1 for T equal bigger than T1 but less than T2, and Q2 otherwise, and Q2 will this is one of the things that we will modify in the process. T1 is March 18, is the day that the public health declared the public health declared a health emergency. T2 is May 8, is the day that the alert level changed from 5 to 4. And then as I said, the Qs will be how relaxed. This is the one that we used to model the true model. And then when we're doing the scenarios, Q2 is the one that we will be modifying according to the rate of infection that we are postulating to have. So at the time T, the overall rate of infection is going to be just the sum of all the infected individuals, or all the rates at the time for the individual active individuals at the time J. The number of infected travelers who fail to self-isolate at this interval follows a Poisson distribution with these parameters, and the parameters were given as this. The first one is three infected travelers who fail to quarantine per month, and the other one is much lower. The 3 per month is the one that is the lower bound that we estimate of travelers who failed to quarantine before the travel ban was implemented. And the 0.008 is what by the middle of June, what we thought was a little bit more, it was the effect that they have the travel ban. So it shut down very much traveling, and so the travel restrictions, the number of individuals per month dropped very drastically. Infected individuals who failed to quarantine, in part because the travel ban, and in part because it's an increase in awareness of the public regarding infections and how infections came to the province. The probability, and now that's a part of how move from susceptible to infected, and from infected there. Now, how we change from infected to remove, or from pre-symptomatic to clinical, or to symptomatic, or to preclinical to clinical. And then we have the probability of removing the T individual from that we also assume that it follows a distribution in general, gamma distributions, Erlag distributions, or gamma distributions, I think, were the ones. And here, this is very much the only component that of the parameter, the parameters of this gamma distribution were the scale of the lab, were the only ones who we estimate using the data that we had. All the other ones, we just took the values from the literature and the model kind of fit. So the time T, the overall rate of removal from any given compartment of the compartment K is lambda K parenthesis T is missing there, and it just is adding up the individual things. And then the general assumption is the new infections and new removals are modeled as a non-homogeneous poisson process. Now, this is a model. To determine the impact of the travel restrictions, we can characterize the clinical infections occurring in Newfoundland after the May 4th as prior, which are infected individuals who were part of an infection chain that started before May 4. And they were individuals who were already living in Newfoundland that were infected before May 4, before the travel ban came. Travel are the individuals who were not residents and who came to Newfoundland and bought infection from somewhere else. And the locals are the individuals who were infected, are Newfoundland residents or Newfoundland and Labrador residents who did not travel outside the province and got infection from a traveler who got into the chain of infections because of they got in contact with a traveler, an infected traveler who did not quarantine. So the number of clinical cases that we call travel-related then is the sum of the people who travel infected and the people who were local and infected. And this is the model. This is the number of active cases and the number with travel restrictions and without travel restrictions. You notice that before May 4, the models should be very much the same, and they are pretty much the same, bearing randomness because of the simulations. These graphs were taken from 1,000 simulation runs of the model. So, and then we assume that there were different scenarios, that the scenarios were the contact rates that we were assuming will happen after the alert level 5 was removed or were going to be implemented. So it makes sense to see what. So this is because we did not have, because the travel was shut down. We did not have but many cases for weeks and weeks and weeks in Newfoundland. So we will start this study was used. What if we have not done or the province has not done the travel restrictions, the travel ban, what will have happened? And then they say, well, if we have had 40% contact rates in the province, so if we will be in a very in lockdown mode, it doesn't really matter. Lockdown will take care of everything if we are in lockdown mode. Nothing will happen. And as we start to relax the lockdown measures, the impact could have been much bigger. So this is more or less. If the contact rates were 40%, which is just a little, our estimation is that at the time of the lockdown and the time of the more stringent lockdown or in the province, the contact rates drop down to 30%, and then they start to slowly be relaxed. We move into 40, 50, 60. We may be now in the 80s. So, and yes, this is this half of the from May on, we see that is a big increase if the travel ban had not been implemented, and we were going to relax the measures. And if we were going to be living in a lockdown, it really don't matter. Lockdown will take care of everything. So the total infections of May, and this includes the ones who were local, the ones who were prior, they were, the expectations or the predictions were that the bulk of the infections is not that what matters here. What matters is that there is a lot out of liners, and every one of these outline black dots may be interpreted as a possible outbreak. And here, well, when they go beyond 100 or 200. So, and then you can see, if you just look into the travel-related infections after May 4, with travel restrictions, we have very much no outbreak at all. And without travel restrictions, we will have had situations where we will have the probability of having an outbreak was not negligible, although the bulk of things will be less than 100, for example, less than 100 infections. And this is another the same picture, used to say how many with travel restrictions. We have very little caused by travel. This use the green little bar here is very few, very few, nearly zero. And we generally realize we will have 3 local infections, and very much all the infections that we will be accounting for will be prior to will be the ones that we have prior to the travel ban. Now, when we move that without travel restrictions, we will have more or less 6.3 infections in the 90 days due to travel or travelers. But the number of locals, the number of infected individuals caused by these travelers will be high enough to be in a small provinces like ours to be not negligible, and that is very much so the moral of this thing. Our model shows that failing to implement the travel restrictions on May 4, it will result in 24 times more COVID cases over the subsequent 9 weeks. This finding is more or less what has been postulated in literature by Anderson and their group. The other thing is, without travel restrictions, the probability, we saw the outliers, the probability of outbreaks is much higher, although the travel restrictions may not be alone may be insufficient to limit the COVID spread, since local physical distances undertaken by local community also affects the contact rates anywhere, and also will be a determinant in the final size of the outbreak. Measures like physical distances, testing, contact tracing will have been sufficient to slow the exponential growth of the infection in local community caused by infected travelers who fail to comply with self-isolation. That is the case. That's something that the people who criticize the travel ban says, and it will be true if we live in lockdown. It may not be true if we relax the lockdown, as if we have the life that we are having now, for example. That statement will not be true. And also has been argued that the travel ban are efficient and cause more harm than good. And it's very common to say that the travel ban you don't get the pandemic, you don't get active cases of COVID, but you will get the streets full of homeless people. And we have, that was said in the beginning. Right now, we have been 90 days, many months under this, and we have not seen that true. We argue that the economical impact of of the travel ban, not only the travel ban, the measures, the strict measures, lockdown measures, and so on, to control the spread of the disease in a small community are very important, and it should not be disregarded. Not because it looks a little bit too politically incorrect or because people will complain about COVID fatigue, which should take, or public health should take away those tools who are legitimate tools to control a disease. If you ask Newfoundlanders right now how they feel about travel ban, they are very happy. Most of people, a common person in the street will tell you that having no cases, it feels really good. Being able to go and keep on your life just with the mask and social distancing and not being worried about more than that is sort of a nice place to be. So effective community actions may be unpopular and may carry economic consequence, but sometimes are necessary to control to control an outbreak. Furthermore, the solutions that are thought to be appropriate for big urban areas, they are not necessarily good for small communities. We argue that Atlantic Canada may have more to lose in responding timidly and slowly to a second wave, because it may shift from a community eradication into an endemic regime. Whereas the other regions, for example, Quebec and Ontario, doing a slow reaction just shifts an endemic situation to a higher endemic, or a little higher endemic. The argument is that because of the size of the community, if we don't act quickly, we may move into a situation that we will not want to be. We are currently working in an stochastic optimum control, using stochastic optimum control principles to show that travel restrictions and escalation and other public measures that some detractors think they are unpopular or cause harm, they are not only the right thing to do, but they are also economically sound. There is people who they harm less than what people thought. Economically, they harm less than what people thought at the beginning of the pandemic, and in many cases they do not. They are less. They are the best option that we can have. So now, how optimal control works? So we simplify the model a little bit just to work in an optimal control. We go into the SIR model, the regular SIR model, and this is the SIR model in an ODE. So, and the optimal control in an ODE is formulated in terms of a function that we want to minimize, and that function will, which is the cost function or the control function, and it takes value in our case, because we have phrased this problem into the measures that a number of discrete measures that public health will implement is a finite number of possibilities, depending upon the public health policy implemented. So then the problem is just to minimize this function Q of X beta T, and T, given by the expression that I put there. And the betas will just depend on hypothetical R zeros that, or contact rates, or whatever you want to phrase it, that are induced by the actions taken by the public health officials, so by the implemented by public health officials. And for this study, to try this concept, we try only three levels of one is three levels of control. One is relaxed, another moderate, another strict. Strict will be what we were at the beginning when the full lockdown, and the other ones are relaxed lockdown, and the other is very much what we are now. No, yeah. So, and then we can solve this, use Runge-Kut methods or whatever, okay? So, however, as I said, this is the concept in ODEs. And counting process and the discrete process as we have it, as we implement it for a small population, we will have to find the counting process equivalent to the ODE that we put there. And then the changes, the things change to rates in a non-homogeneous Poisson process, as I described before. And here is much simpler process because I have only one compartment of infected, one for susceptible, and the other for recovered. So, and then we can play with things here. So we can look into the class of general solutions, or I decided just to go for the class of Markov control functions because they are easier to optimize, and they are easy to argue for. They are easy to explain to people, and in such a case, an optimal control strategy using a Markov control function in the context of the dynamic programming will look like the expression 5 that we have here. It's just an expectation of very similar to the one that we use in the ODE. And then we have, but here we have to have some optimization over the admissible values of the integral. So the maximum control or the optimum control will be a sequence of beta j's that optimize the equation 5. So we may impose something, because if we use Labrador, it may become so ticklish. So we impose some other constraints, like if a change of regime is done, we have to stay in that regime for at least K0 times, because otherwise we will be just flip, flop, and that's not a good strategy. So we impose this, that if to impose a change only when the change is really necessary. We could also, I did not do that, but we could also impose a penalty for switching regimes, and that will take care of that. So it will not need to be running a minimum of a K0. This is just the concept that we want. And with this procedure ends up, we will have a sequence of stopping times in the time horizon T. The stopping time is T1, theta 2, tau 1, tau 2, and a corresponding sequence of impulse values of the control sequence. So we will have at which time what was the sequence, what was the control, at which time what was the control, at which time what was the control, and so on. So here are some examples, fictional or toy examples of how this thing works. So if we have a low importation rate, optimal control works, starts with a relaxed alert level of 1.5. Then when there are infections spread in the community, then it moves to an alert level of 0.9, which is the medium level. And the optimal control is that outbreak, because even when we can moderate is 0.9, the outbreak gets fixed or gets taken care of, and it switches back to the relaxed model. So this is a situation with a low importation rate. If we have a very high importation rate, what we will have is, in the beginning we have few cases, and we will be in the green level, in the very relaxed, but then we will reach the some level, we will go into the medium level, and then we will just be switching very small periods of moderate and big periods of very strict controls. So this is very much a slow burn scenario that we are talking. Now, if I do this, this is the stochastic. If I do this with same conditions with no stochastic, what I will have is this periodic solution. The conclusions here are in dealing with COVID, there is not a solution that is good for everyone. Small jurisdictions like Atlantic provinces and territories may have a lot to lose with a timid and slow response to an outbreak. And the consequence will be shifting for containment, that is where we are now, to mitigation, that is where most of Canada is, or the big places are. And the other conclusion that we reach here is that if we are going to escalate, if we are in a small community and we're going to escalate, we have to do it swiftly and robust, not timidly. If the escalation is going to happen, it has to happen quick and very robust, so that the number of active cases are put down, under control, and then we can relax again. I am not sure how this thing will work in a big urban area, but for small communities like Newfoundland and Labrador, PI, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, I think this is not only the right thing to do, is the economical thing to do. When we put the economical thing, we also have to consider the human suffering of the places where the outbreaks get out of the control. And this is the end of my presentation. I want to acknowledge Amy Hurford, who is the leader of the group, Maria Martignoni, who is working in the optimum control, Proton Han, from that also leads the group that advises the province, Troy Day, and Julian Arnio from University of Queens and Manitoba, respectively. I am ready. I can entertain some questions.
Thank you. First, let's thank JC for interesting talk. And do we have any questions? Please let me know either in the chat or by raising your hand. Let me see. Will I be able to see your hand? So while we're waiting for a question, maybe I'll start asking the first question.
Yes.
So you see, your point very interestingly is that when you're dealing with this relatively small population, you're subject to stochastic fluctuations.
Yep.
And so therefore you need to use this kind of approach. But does your model, if I let the population go to infinity, does your model transform into the usual model?
It will. The model will be equivalent to an stochastic SDE. Yes, it will be what we have now. It will be Brownian motion very much. Yes.
Okay. Very interesting. While I wait, Sarah, keep an eye. If you see other people putting their hand up that I don't notice, please let me know. But until then, I'll just ask another question.
Sure.
In your choice of your function Q of t, it was piecewise linear, right? Piecewise constant, in fact. But is that just simply because the data seems to suggest that's okay, or you didn't want to choose a more sophisticated one that would vary?
No, the reason is that Q responds to the implementation of the measures that public health implements. They say, right now we are in alert level 5 and alert level 5 consists of this and that and that and that and that. Or alert level 3 and this consists in that and that and that. And then we just go and what are the rates of contact rates. So it become piecewise constant because we are depending upon the public health mandate or implementation of the measure. Yeah, but we can put a continuous function and then optimize it at every. It is.
Yeah, the question really, the issue is that the government introduces a public health measure, but then the rate of compliance may vary. So, for example, government may mandate masks, and then compliance may be 20%. I mean, that's an extreme case, some 20% or something. So, it might, there's a fluctuation even when we are in a particular set of health measures. That's why I was thinking that.
Yes, and we take that into consideration in the function. Yeah, this is a very simple model. When we are doing the optimal control, it's a very simple model, because the idea will be to use the other model that I used before to do the predictions. The one who uses the 3 compartments and the 21 days and the distribution, because then we will know which parts of the curve are being affected. For example, in this case, I am not considering the division of asymptotics and clinical and subclinical asymptotics. When you have, for example, measures like contact tracing is quite important, and then the first model that I presented is obvious the importance of contact tracing, because with contact tracing you remove from the pool of infected people who are in the asymptomatic pool. And in this case we don't have, and this toy model that I use for the optimum control, we don't have that. But yes, it will be necessary to implement those things. And right now what we're trying is to prove the concept that it is economically sound and it makes sense for a community, like for a small jurisdiction like the territories or the Atlantic provinces.
Okay, it's very interesting work. I enjoyed the talk. I don't see any other questions from the audience, so I'll give you a minute.
Sorry, there's a question from Thomas P.
Please.
Yeah, correctly. Many thanks. Unfortunately, I joined a bit too late, and so I missed maybe the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, which may be important because you developed then the model. But so in case you can reflip the slides a bit to the beginning, that would maybe help in course of the questions. Thank you, Lotte. And the thing is now that I wanted to comment on was, first of all, the moderator in the beginning asked whether for n to infinity, the model would go to the usual model. What do you mean with the usual model? Is it the SIR model, the SIR model?
Yeah, I thought so, yeah.
Then I would say no, it will not converge to this, because the SIR model will has also a finite n. Of course, you can ask, let's take both of these n's to infinity. And what happens then?
Yeah, but you know, it's a device. The integral, if you see it right now on the screen, it has a indicator function that is only finite in one small portion of the interval. Everywhere else is 0.
Yeah, that's what I also mean. And at this point, exactly at this point, there's the main difference between the models. And because of this, I also have once written this down, that there's a major difference between the SIR model and this kind of model where you take into account the finite infectious period. I have a paper on medRxiv, which has exactly the same point made. Maybe it's I write my name and you can look it up.
Yes, please.
Then it's I noticed this also, and therefore I also switched to this model type, modeling with a finite infectious period, and this gives them more. This gives more accurate parameter estimates, I would say, because then all the parameters get real. Whereas in the SEER model, from Mechanic, the model, the original one, historical one, the parameters you get out there, they will be only like phenomenally. I mean, if they give the right phenomena, but they are not physically any real. But okay, so this was one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to say
I
was...
do not understand. This is just a mathematical device to express something. It's nothing. If I can put an expression there instead of that. Yeah, I don't think that's... I disagree
what I meant...
fair of you.
What I meant was, if one uses the Mechanic model, Mechanic, I think, I don't know how it's pronounced. Not, I mean, the one that from 1927, this paper.
Yeah.
If you use this model, then you have no possibility to model the finite infectious period. And for this reason, I think you will have never the right physically correct parameters. And you can never estimate like from a curve of trajectory of infections, you can never estimate parameters which correspond to real how should I say
real trajectories.
Not real, no, what I mean is the parameters that control the infectiveness locally between people. For example, if you say in 3 weeks, one infected person infects like 3 or 4 or 7 people, this kind of parameter.
Now I know what you're talking about. Now, that is not only of this model. Every SIR model has problems with identifiability. That's why you choose to select the parameters from somewhere else, not from the model, and you only estimate from the model whatever you can't estimate from your data. If I have a parameter, if I have a model, if I have 100 points and I have a parameter or a model who has 100 parameters, it will be impossible. It's stupid to try to estimate the data, the parameters from the data. So the way that mechanistic models work and the way that these things are work is that you estimate for example, the serial infection is not estimated from this data. It's given, as I said, it was estimated from the Hubei data and then from the Thailand data and so on. And at some point, I just took the distribution as it is. And as I said, once that I took the distribution, I don't need to put anything else. I don't need to be finessing or adjusting. It just came the curves as they are. And I can challenge most people to make an ODE curve, whatever you want to put that fits like that.
Yeah. The last sentence I may not have probably understood, but I agree definitely that it's not necessarily desired that one estimates the parameters from the trajectories and
I don't
of course,
estimate the parameters from the trajectories.
Yeah, correct.
I only estimate one parameter from the trajectories.
Yeah, but the thing is, well, I say it privately for me that I would want to try it, or I have the ambition kind of to estimate like at least one. But of course, you say, and it's correct. One can use this kind of clinical data to get some input for the parameters. But okay, well. What else did I want to say? Yeah, the thing was definitely with this control. I mean, this comes up again when that's just the kind of feedback, but I wouldn't know how to do it better. I mean, the thing with this finding the optimal control, then you go back to the SEER model, but I'm wondering whether there would not be a substantial difference if one has to do this kind of optimal control in the more realistic model. And that's what I just can give as a feedback, but I don't know how I can approach this better.
Yeah, I think the SIR model is a type model. maybe the Seir model is a little bit better, much closer to the realistic one. I have anything that can where you can divide the fact that somebody is pre-infective or pre-clinical and fully infective, and because every time where you can have a realistic model of the infectious process or the infectivity process, any model that does that well will perform well.
Yeah.
Because that's the crucial part. Everything else is just little minutia in the model. The crucial thing is to model properly the infectivity process.
Yeah, correct. Well, yeah, and that's, I mean, this exactly the results that we see on this current slide is exactly what then comes out, I think. Yeah, and that's good. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm finished with my feedback on questions, but yeah, so I'm giving further to the next asker, to the next.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we have to bring the seminar to a close now because we're out of time. And so thank you very much, JC. It was an excellent talk. Your slides, I guess, will be posted for further review. And if you have a preprint or a paper, if you would like to post that, you're welcome to, or you can send it to me. I'd be happy to see it.
The preprint is in the link of the presentation.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Thomas P, I'll be interested in your preprinters or reprinter as well.
Yes, where will be these the slides of the current?
So we at the Fields Institute website, we have a page for the COVID seminar, and usually we post all every talk, the video and the slides.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks again to the speaker.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Bye.
Give me this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.